Hey folks, welcome back to another fun podcast. Today I got Philly G, one of the realtors on my team. He's going to help us out with this video, and it's all about moving to Tampa, Florida. So tons of you call us. I mean, hundreds of families every year reach out to us to help them move to Tampa, but a lot of you guys don't have plans in place. So that's why I titled this video, don't move to Tampa, Florida without a plan. It's the number one thing you got to have. It just makes life easy on you, right? We talk to so many of you guys that are just tons of anxiety, tons of frustration. Where do I start? The options are overwhelming. Or, you even hear some of you guys say, hey, I've watched a ton of your videos, for 6 months, but I still don't know where to go. So a lot of that can be answered right here in this video. I'm going to give you a handful of questions that you should ask yourself before really starting that process. It's going to help you. It's going to save you time, anxiety, and just make the whole process a whole lot smoother. So jumping into it, I always say, where to start. People always ask, where should I live? I think in the last video, I just had a comment that said, hey, Adam, send me the top best suburbs to the north, suburbs to the southeast, and even break that down into neighborhoods. And, it really isn't that easy. It's not that easy because there's a bunch of questions and variables there. I can easily tell you, hey, go to Wesley Chapel. Tons of people love Wesley Chapels because of the food, dining, and entertainment. But what if that guy, needed to be near the airport? And maybe he travels 2-3 times a week for his job. Well, it's not a really good suggestion because now he's driving an hour. Maybe it makes more sense to hug the Veterans Expressway towards Lutz or Odessa or one of those, suburbs. And so digging in a little bit deeper for yourself is going to go a long way. Not only that, but a lot of you folks, come in town and fly in town to really explore and get a feel for things because it's a narrowing down process, right? So number one, Phil, lifestyle, man. What are you hearing? What are some of the things that you're hearing with your folks, calling in? Because I know that some of the questions or some of the things we talk about, anybody listening or viewing, they're going to, relate to. So what are some of those things that you're hearing when you take the phone calls?
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing is when I start talking to everybody, my job, I feel like to help you first is find that area. So, I like to touch on, do you have family in town, that you can be close by? Where are you working, right? There's a lot of remote jobs nowadays, so not necessarily location based on work. What do you guys like to do on your free time? What do your kids like to do on your free time? All those different, questions, I'll kind of start off as like a baseline. It's really easy then to get the conversation going, start to dig a little bit deeper in. But those are definitely the points that I always hit on first.
Yeah, so we're trying to figure out those important things, right? Where do you live? Or I'm sorry, where do you want to live based on your lifestyle? So where do you work? Are kids' schools important?
Mm-hmm.
Are you somebody that's a foodie? Do you like food options? Shopping? I want to be near the water. I don't want to be near the water, right? There's a lot of
the good old beach.
Well, there's that, right? Like people love the beach, but then they start talking about flood insurance. That's a big deal that people ask me about. And so understanding all those different things, maybe they want new construction, right? We don't have new construction communities, master plan communities in the city. So right away that tells us, well, if you want new construction, you're going out of the suburbs.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, what's next on your list? Well, I want schools. Okay. Well, while as a realtor, I can't just tell you this is a good school, this is a bad school, nor would that make sense because I've seen people fall in love with a 5 or 6 out of 10 because the ratings are just wrong. And then I've also seen people that you put them in an A-rated school like myself at one point, and it's not their cup of tea. And so really giving them that, starting them off with the A-rated maybe on paper, and then saying, do your due diligence as a parent, right?
Well, and also you gotta look at your kids too. What are your kids, they really into sports, they really into music and the art, especially a lot of the people that I get called from the north, they can't understand the charter school aspect either. So that's kind of, a direction that we have out here in Tampa that's not very common in a lot of other areas.
Yep. So for any of you folks listening, charter school. So there's obviously a public school, which you need to be assigned in that school zone. So your address needs to be in that school zone, and then your kid goes to that school, right? And if they're outside, there's a very slim chance by choicing into a school that you can get in, but you can't buy a house based on that. Number 2 option would be private school. Everybody knows what that is. You pay and you can go if there's an opening, right? And then the next option is kind of a hybrid, right? It's going to be a charter school. The best way I can explain it is it follows the public school curriculum, but then you can add in electives. So, public school is just straight lace. Private school can do what they want, kind of, and then the charter is a little bit of a hybrid. The other thing with the charter school is you don't have to be in an assigned school zone. And Tampa and the surrounding areas really start to introduce this at a high level. And let's use Wesley Chapel since we talked about that. That's a really good example. So Wesley Chapel High and Wiregrass High were the two main public high schools that were, in that area. Well, I'd say the population there doubled, if not tripled, over the last 5 to 10 years. So in doing that, those schools will get overran. So instead of changing the school zones, they're like, hey, let's add in 1 or 2 charter schools that are not bound by the addresses. And now it's not going to overrun the schools, but you can address new schools and introduce new schools for all the residents. So yeah, we definitely have charter school options, and that goes, in the conversation of, hey, you got kids, I love using my own examples because this is real life stuff. But at one point back in 2016, my family and I actually moved to Cheval. So we moved to Lutz, and Cheval was like this prestigious golf course, guard gated community, right? And I found a good fixer upper because that's kind of how I do my business. Is I've lived in 4 or 5 fixer uppers, live in them, and benefit on the capital gains. But I still have to think about my lifestyle. So Phil, we moved into this Cheval house, beautiful. All my kids loved it. My family loved it. However, and by the way, for folks that don't know, in Lutz, the Steinbrenner High School District holds a lot of clout. It's one of the popular schools with people. And so I figured we got into an A-rated school, elementary all the way through high school. My daughter at the time was, I think, 3. And I was like, man, this is a great move for my family. Unfortunately, my brother, 3 cousins, they all lived in the city, and they all put our kids into this one private school. And I was like, man, I can't miss the opportunity to have my 2 kids with like 9 other cousins, right? So we ended up going with the private school route. On top of that, the kindergarten class was 186 kindergartners, right? And I'm not talking one class. They had like 6 classes of 30 kids each, which was crazy to me. I'm like, how are they ever going to know, the other kids?
Teachers are outnumbered.
Yeah, again, I'm not saying a right or wrong route for people. Everybody has a different version. But for me, it made sense to be with all the cousins. And on top of that, at the time, my wife worked for the hospital in the city. So our life was in the city, man. The kids' school, my wife's job, really a lot of the real estate that I did. I would meet people at coffee shops in the city, right? To have our meetings and things like that. So my life took me away from Lutz and back into the city, okay? It only lasted about 2.5 years in Lutz, and we were back in. So I love to use that example because on paper, it was perfect. School zones, prestigious, community. So my flip, right, or my fixer upper was going to gain a ton of value. Everything was perfect. The house was like our dream house, still better than the house I live in now. But the lifestyle didn't make sense for my family. So number one, dive into this lifestyle, right? Talk about the schools, talk about the dining options, the shopping options. Some people don't want all that. Some people want to, we talk about Lithia all the time, right?
Well, yeah. Folks, Lithia is just like, I'm from New Jersey, right? It's like one of it feels like New Jersey when you're driving through. There's no palm trees, there's oak trees, like windy roads, farms. So it's definitely you got to be very specific what you're looking for. Because I also get a lot of calls in. I need to be in Florida. Like I had to feel like I'm in Florida when I go there. Okay, well then, I would suggest Lithia as the area to go to, but I can bring you to like Apollo Beach.
Yeah. Or something similar, but that's just one element of many, right?
Yes. Yeah. Very common.
And so, yeah. And you brought something up a bunch of times in meetings we've had. You talk about not only the lifestyle, but the motive. So sometimes I think you mentioned something about like investment sometimes, right? Or, what's your motive bringing here? Because folks come here for politic change, right? I know a lot of people say, don't talk about politics, but it's reality. People move here for a politics change or an environment change. Some folks move here for retirement, young professionals. Right now we have one of the most blossoming or the emerging tech cities. So people move here for the IT jobs, especially young professionals that just got the degrees, just got that entry level. And they're like, man, I get the best of both worlds, lifestyle and career opportunity. So
income tax.
No state income tax, especially for them small business folks. So we're getting a lot of motive coming here. However, you talked about investment before with me.
Yes.
And you're saying a lot of folks are looking at different numbers, right? And different things as far as the investment side.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, surprisingly, not surprisingly, a lot of that is a little bit more of my younger, clientele's come in. Okay. Hey, I want to move into Tampa. It's probably going to be a starter home for me. So where's my best return on investment? Because this is a short-term buy.
Yep.
So they're looking for that equity, quicker than where you're like, okay, hey, I want to find my home and I want to find my home forever, or I want to retire there and I don't want to move ever again.
That's right. That's right. And even then we're still talking, well, like, hey, you never know. Real estate, nobody has that crystal ball, right? What if you have to keep this as a rental? Maybe the market shifts on you. Well, you always got to have that plan B. Are you good living there? Or rental wise, we think about the same things. Like what appeals to most people,
right?
Right. So what's going to hold its value, and we can easily place a renter in there if we have to. So, understanding that. So number one, guys, I don't want to beat a dead horse. It's understanding your lifestyle to a high level, and we can help walk you through that, right? That's what we do as realtors. We're kind of diving through a lot of these different layers that most people don't think about. Most people just tell me, give me a good neighborhood. I want to be close to something. And, and I want a nice house. They don't think about drive times to things that are important. And while I'm saying that, it literally clicked in. One of the biggest things that people talk about is being close to the beaches.
Yeah.
Understand this. It's good to live near the beach if you're going to visit the beach every week. However, most people, locals included, the beach is 35 minutes to 45 minutes away, depending on where you live. If you're in Tampa, not the Pinellas side. So if you're in Tampa, it's only about 45 minutes away. But here's the thing. There's so many things to do in Tampa. It's endless. You guys hear me talk about it all the time on my main videos, that on weekends, like we're not always thinking, hey, let's go to the beach. We might visit the beach once a month. My kids are like, hey, let's go to the festival. Let's go to a concert. Let's go to a Sunday market. It's not always beach, beach, beach. It's just one of the amazing things that we have, at our disposal. So I'd say we visit the beach about once a month. I mean, Phil, how often do you go?
It's once a month. It's a day trip, It's same thing.
It's a quick day trip.
It was at home. There's just, again, I've been here since 2009. I've never been bored a day. And, moving down here, the beach was one of the highlights for me. I'm going to be a little bit closer to the beach. Yeah. We plan the whole day to go there. And then after that, there's so many things to do in between.
Yeah. So I always like to make the point that if you're going to visit the beach weekly, okay, maybe shift a little bit closer to the beach. However, if you're going to be at the beach once a month or maybe more than that, just when you really want to experience the beach, get a beach rental for a weekend, get a beach rental for a week, and then you can totally unwind and get that full beach feeling. Otherwise, it makes more sense to things that you're going to do weekly, right? Like shopping, food, entertainment, schools, on and on and on. And I'd rather be closer to that since I'm experiencing that on the weekly or daily basis than at the beaches, right? So,
or
anyway.
nowadays you can just put a lagoon in your community and call it a day.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, that kind of transitions us to the next section, right? The next thing is once you've narrowed down the area, right? So usually when folks call you, Phil, right, you pick 1, 2, or 3 areas to narrow down for them.
Yes,
so you might say, hey, you're not familiar with here. Let's show Wesley Chapel and let's show Apollo Beach, right? Because those are 2 areas that match your budget, match your lifestyle. And I want you to see it because they are 2 very different vibes.
Right.
And, so, it's not as easy as saying Wesley Chapel fits everybody or Apollo Beach. I'd say if you take 10, it's probably a 60-40 or 70-30 split. So taking them to both is a great thing. Now, before they ever even catch a flight and come in, or if you're local, before you just start jumping around and going to suburbs, we've got 2 areas narrowed down. Let's look at your budget, which we'll talk about in a second. That's my third point. But let's look at your budget. And from there, let's start to look at different builders or different communities that have homes in your budget, right?
Right.
So you don't want to have a $400,000 budget looking at Homes by West Bay at $700K.
Correct.
So our job is to work with you, narrow down the area, narrow down the communities, or if you're looking at new construction, builder specific, and finding out where they are that work within your plan, right?
Yeah.
This automatically, on the resale side, by the way, you'll start setting up people's, searches for people, and you'll say, man, I only got 17 homes to look at in this new area, right? Because inventory is a little bit short. That's okay, because at least we saw everything on the market, and then we could set you up a search that it emails you day one, a new house that fits your criteria, emails you, boom, done, right?
And a lot of my clients like that because, again, it's seamless. It comes every morning to them or every other day, however you want me to set it up. And it just keeps you in tune with what's happening with the market. If there's price cuts, you start to, right away. So it definitely gives you a way to start tracking, also market trends and conditions as well.
Yeah, and I couldn't imagine being on the buyer side, not knowing an area. Like I try to put myself in the buyer's shoes in a way that are relocating from a different area. It's like I couldn't go to Kansas City, even as a realtor, and say, hey, I want this type of lifestyle. I want this type of area. I want to break it down to this type of community, right? Even in the buyer's shoes, when you start to narrow it down to a home search, I mean, there's so much to consider. Like, do I want to be in a neighborhood? And we're talking neighborhood level at this point. Right. Do I want to be in a neighborhood that has all the amenities? And will I use the amenities? Like, does having trails matter? Well, no, if you're not a runner or biker. Do playgrounds matter? No, not if you don't have not if you don't have kids. And then you start to say, well, what's in it for me? Will I use a community pool, or is that just a cool concept? Because you're going to pay for those amenities in the form of an HOA or a CDD fee. And if those really don't matter, then we need to start focusing on neighborhoods that don't have those. Like, stop wasting your time, like the buyer's time. Let's help you focus on what you're really interested in. Maybe communities with no CDD or no HOA, right?
Yeah, well, and I think it's really important to consider those things because you got to remember when you have HOA and you have CDD, that does take away from your buying power, right? When you're getting underwritten in a loan, right? Those are things going to be used against how much you can purchase your home for. So you got to really start to weigh those options too, because again, like it's going to change also what price point you're looking at as well.
Yep. So at this point, we've already thought about your lifestyle, right? We've thought about, okay, I'm going to work downtown, and so I need to be 30 minutes from that or the airport, right? I want to be 30 minutes from the beaches because that's important to me. Whatever that looks like, time frame. We've thought about access to dining, shopping, entertainment, or school zones important. That's going to be in your lifestyle category. And then narrowing it down further to the neighborhoods within those areas. Do I want a CDD, HOA? Do I want acreage with land and I don't want anybody to tell me what to do? Do I want a condo high rise with no maintenance, right? What does all of that look like? But once we've narrowed it down to there, we're not done yet. You can't just fly into Tampa with even that and be like, I'm ready, right? I think you need to understand your finances next, because sometimes that even helps narrow it down, right? Because some areas are more expensive than others. Like if you tell me I have 400,000, yeah, I mean, and even sometimes $1 million, right? I've had somebody say, I want $1 million, I want 3,000 square feet. Well, I don't know if I can get you into South Tampa,
right?
To be frank, So sometimes budget, and a lot of times people forget what 7% looks like. They're thinking, hey, I got pre-approved at 4% or 3% 3 years ago. Now it's 6-7%. I need to know what those finances are like, and if I can stomach, or if I'm happy with what that monthly payment looks like. So, Phil, I mean, you're real tight with Brian Marks. We've had him on here before. What's that conversation look like, with you, if you're talking to a buyer and they're like, and you're suggesting that finance? I mean, what are the kind of like what's the, what's the next step there?
Well, let me tell you, Brian's so good that he really he's the one that really digs deep into that process, which is a beautiful thing, because at the end of the day, he's the one that's going to be underwriting a loan, right? So he helps me understand, what is realistic. Again, because I don't want to just bring people out and show them, $1 million home and their budget's 700,000, right? Because you're probably, that's what I do to myself all the time. I go in these mansions when we're touring around, and then it's like, that's not in the near future, right? So he really starts to really paint the picture. Okay, hey, and then in different towns we have also different taxes too, different mills. So being able to understand that, and I could I do that over the phone as well. Okay, hey, if you're looking in South Tampa, okay, prepare. You probably a good chance you're in that flood zone. Probably your taxes are going to get reevaluated. We don't know where they're going to be. There's a lot of unknowns.
Yep. Yep. And so what's really good about Brian, and I appreciate about Brian, if Brian, you're ever looking at this, is the fact that he's our preferred lender and we can send people to him. And he's good with even just having the conversation. Like, a lot of folks will tell you, run your credit. I mean, if you're 9 months out, 10 months out, your timeline from buying something and you're buying specifically resale, that'll expire. There's no reason to necessarily run your credit. In some cases, he'll maybe tell you yes, but if you know you have got 800 credit, right, 750 credit, you don't need to run it. We just need to know what your debt, to income ratio is. And there's ways to find that out to start plugging that in and having those conversations around an approximate price, right?
Right.
So,
and the one thing with that too is when I work with Brian, when you do that credit pull, he can pull it many times. I believe it's within a 45 days, and it won't reflect a harder inquiry.
Yeah. There's definitely a gap there. I've heard 90, 120, something like that. But yeah, there's definitely a range.
There's a range, right? And that's why you want to do it when you're kind of getting ready to pull the trigger on moving.
That's right. Now, understanding what that looks like, because as a realtor, that again, there's a whole nother set of variables and equations that lenders look at to get, everybody's very different, right? Credit, your debt, there's a lot of variables that go into like what you can afford. I knew a guy that had $1 million, but he spent $1 million a year, so he couldn't buy a house. And he's like, what? This is my income. It doesn't matter. So getting with a lender, understanding how much you can shop with helps us understand what to put in front of you and to start that narrowing process down, right?
And even go a little further, just to touch on that. He'll also kind of coach you, hey, don't make if you're going to be looking to move in July, don't make a car purchase, just little tips like that, where again, like if it's not told you, you might not consider that when you're driving that new Mercedes out of the lot, when you're test driving it,
Yeah. And all you had to do was maybe wait a month later or 2 months later.
Yeah. But you didn't know.
Still got that.
You didn't know.
I know. Listen, I had a doctor years ago, man. He bought his wife, I think it was an anniversary gift. He got her a Mercedes like right before, but they were in the process. And we were able to reverse it and figure something out, but it literally almost lost the deal for him. And he was like, what did I do? And I was like, man, we told you don't buy anything. He's like, I didn't think about it. It was a lease,
right.
Something like that. And it just threw everything off. We were able to fix it, but it got a little hairy there. So, last part of this, and this really helps us help you plan, right? Lifestyle, finances, narrowing down neighborhoods is your timeline, because we approach things differently. And so should you folks, when planning to come in, are you buying new construction? Are you buying resale homes? Your timeline is a big deal. What I mean by that is, when do you want to close on the house? When do you want them to hand you the keys? Because that looks different for both scenarios, right?
Right. And also too, Adam, you have to sell a house, right?
Yeah. Sometimes
you might want to move here in September, right?
Yep.
But again, if you're in a situation where you have to sell your home to be able to buy a home, we need to be on that same page as well.
Yeah. I'm really looking at it from this point. Like, I have a lot of people. Here's a funny one, right? They're like, hey, we're not looking to move for another year, right? We get that all the time. And they're like, oh, that's amazing. This is perfect timing. Why? And let's say they want new construction. You're not looking to move for a year, but based on your price point or the type of home that you want, if you're looking at, let's call it a tier 2 builder, 600,000, 700,000, more than likely you could be picking a lot, going to a design center a few, 4 to 8 weeks later, choosing those options, structural upgrades, and then eventually that build process is 8 to 9 months.
Yep.
So that means if you want to be in a home in 1 year, we need to start looking in 3 months.
Right.
9 months out is 3 months. You need to go under contract in 3 months so that you can have your home when you want it. We're working backwards.
Right.
Same thing with somebody that wants a tier 1 builder. We find move-in homes ready that are ready in 30 days, but majority of them are 3 to 6 months out. So again, we're working backwards with you. So I love it when somebody says I'm a year out and they want new construction. It just gives us a couple months to go through this checklist to get you prepped, Right. And on the resale side, same thing. It's like, well, listen, that's even more work because we have to time it right and you have to be flexible, but it's good to have all of these areas narrowed down. I would rather for 3 months send you a list of homes in very specific areas Not only that, but you become very knowledgeable as a consumer. You start to see the price points in a certain neighborhood. You start to get a good feel, because when it comes time that we're like, okay, hey, Phil, we're ready to put an offer in, they've already been seeing the price points and the homes turnover. They go from like, how many times have you sent a list to somebody and then like maybe 5 homes and then 3 of them are pending by the end of the weekend?
Oh, it happens. Right? It happens all the time. So I usually set up about 2 days before they start coming out. Okay, hey, let's look at everything that we can actually book now.
Yep. But how amazing is it if you're 2 months looking at those neighborhood setups and you're watching how fast these homes go under contract? You're also seeing like what prices they list for versus maybe what they sold for, or how fast it helps you become knowledgeable and confident when it comes time for you to buy in that same neighborhood, because you're like, man, I've been watching these homes. They go off, they go quickly, compared to somebody who's never looked at that before. They call us and they're like, I'm going to sleep on it. And then they miss that first deal. And it takes them a couple times to figure out, man, Adam or Phil was not joking. Like, we need to act if we really like the house. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there is absolutely nothing wrong with planning. It will put you in the driver's seat. Understand your lifestyle. That'll help us help you narrow your search down into the suburb, the neighborhood, what type of home you want to be in. And then, of course, what you can afford. And all of this puts you into a really good position to put your family and yourself into not only a neighborhood that you're going to like, but a home you're going to like. And if we really have enough time to work with you, then we can put you, that successful formula where you're really confident making an offer in a place that you've really only visited once or twice before ever buying something. So I would tell you guys, prepare. I hope this video had some really good nuggets in there for you, something that you could pull from. Myself, Phil, the rest of the team, we would be happy to help you find a home and help your family really narrow down those right areas. So absolutely call us anytime. My information's on the website or on the video. And, until that next video, we're going to catch you later.